Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this special encore performance with John Sandford discussing his new book, The Investigator. And I apologize to everybody who tried to watch our live event last night. We had some sort of catastrophic internet glitch, and it just kept buffering and buffering. And so I apologize. And thanks so much to John for agreeing to come back and do this little program to make up for that.
So it's not fatal, because actually the first 10 minutes of it is now going to be posting on our homepage at poisonedpen.com. So you can watch that, and then we're going to have this wonderful conversation. But John, I have news for you that you may not have seen that I couldn't have told you last night. Parade Magazine embarked on a project to get booksellers and authors and so forth to list 101 best mysteries of all time and the 110 best thrillers of all time. So I am going to read your nomination to you, and it comes from Nora Roberts, Rules of Prey by John Sandford. John Sandford's Prey series, because the characters resonate as human beings who grow throughout the series. The plots are so strong and compelling, and the writing is absolutely solid. So isn't that nice?
It is nice. I just wish my books were selling as well as Nora Roberts' books did.
She has a bookseller husband, so she has an advantage.
Well, I know, no, but that's not her advantage. Her advantage is that she's Nora Roberts and she's a great writer. So,
you know what? You're John Sandford and you're a great writer too. So
I'm
going to try to remember some of the highlights from yesterday that you might have missed. So let me start by saying that The Investigator, which I do not have a copy of because we sold out, but John has just agreed to sign more copies for us, and we'll ship those tomorrow, is fabulous. And it is our April Crime Book of the Month here at the Poison Pen for reasons that we can discuss. And it stems from a book that John wrote years ago called Naked Prey, which I absolutely loved. And it introduced Letty. I've been nagging him ever since to write a Letty book.
Yes, I know.
And here we are.
Yeah, right.
I know. Well, I
figured it was one way to shut you up.
No, there is no way to shut me up. You're absolutely right. So tell us about Naked Prey. What is Letty's background? Because she really does have an interesting story that you told us way back then.
Well, Letty Letty grew up in the bleakest part of Minnesota. It's called the Red River Valley. The Red River flows north through Canada into Hudson's Bay, and the further north you get, the bleaker it is. And she lives in a very bleak part of it. It's absolutely flat as a pool table because it used to be the bottom of a huge lake from glacial eras. And her father abandoned her when she was a toddler. Her mother was an alcoholic, an uncontrollable alcoholic. And the only good thing that her mother ever did in her life really was that when a killer came to kill her and Letty, she fought the killer off long enough for Letty to escape. So Davenport comes up to this bleak part of Minnesota to investigate a fairly awful crime, and Letty gets involved in the investigation. And she's like 12 years old, 11 years old, 10 years old. She's just a kid, but she has supported her family by running a trap line in the wintertime at the local dump, among other places, trapping raccoons, and she also traps muskrats and mink and everything else she can get hold of, and sells the hides through a local fur dealer, which that's not uncommon in the farm country up there, mostly sugar beet country. But at any rate, she charms Davenport, and she also shoots a cop on 2 different occasions, never managing to kill him because she had this little crummy 22 with 22 shorts, which is all she could afford. And she didn't manage to kill him. But Davenport and she bonded instantly. They both just kind of felt it between the two of them. And people who look at her think that she's Davenport's natural daughter because she kind of looks like him. She's got exactly the same eyes, and she's got dark hair like Davenport does. So after her mother was killed, Davenport adopted her. Davenport and his wife adopted her as their legal daughter, and she grew up with him, and she went from this life of serious poverty, in the serious backwoods poverty, to one of, pretty serious affluence. Davenport's a rich guy, and she's a smart woman, and she went off to Stanford, which you're familiar with, I understand. And she spent 6 years there and got a master's degree in economics. Then she went east to work for a senator, kind of set up by Davenport a little bit. But she found out she was bored, and she did one last job for the senator. And what happened was that she had to do some kind of illegal stuff in the course of this job. And the senator was very impressed because she got the job done and she wasn't scared by what she had done that might have been illegal. And he said, we can use your talents. And so now she kind of works for the Department of Homeland Security and the senator at the same time. And he sends her on special jobs. And the one that this book is one of those special jobs. That's
so Letty is no stranger to killing. And in fact, she doesn't seem to suffer any after effect from it. She doesn't suffer from traumatic shock. She doesn't seem to suffer from guilt or anything. Do you think that, John, you created her, so obviously you think this, sorry, because she ran a trap line and she was, used to that sort of thing, that she was okay?
She was used to killing.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a good thing. I ran a little trap line when I was a kid. And I don't think that that's a good thing for most people. But she did it to survive. She was not fooling around. She was desperate to survive, and she would get like $5 for a muskrat hide. So she had to kill hundreds of muskrats to keep the family afloat. She doesn't feel like she should apologize for the shootings that she's done because the people who she shot deserved it. Later on in the series of books, Davenport busts a really violent drug gang, and two of the survivors of the gang go to Davenport's house intending to kill his family in revenge for their gang being all shot to pieces. And Letty kills both of them. And she does it without mercy. She doesn't even think about it, doesn't have to worry about it, and she doesn't feel bad afterwards. She saved the lives of her mother and her younger brother. So,
well, there's a lot of violence in The Investigator for good reasons. It's not there to be sensational. It's just because it's a violent situation. And I asked John before, but I'll say it again, that it seemed to me that his career as a crack investigative reporter, for which he's won a Pulitzer Prize, probably gave him a skill set that has allowed him to portray the middle of America, people who have lives without much hope or much meaning, and their only real trajectory appears to be down. And they are a major part of this book, which has a particularly good villain who is shaped by all that. So is that a fair statement, do you think, John?
Yeah, sure it is. And because I spent, 25 years reporting from the time I went into the Army, where I was a reporter in the Army in Korea, where at the time that I was in Korea, it was 10 years after the Korean War, and the poverty was rather severe there. And then Southeast Missouri, and then I reported in Miami, which was, going through the big expansion of the Cuban community. And I did a lot of crime out in the countryside. And I saw, a lot of strange and awful things. And I believe it's had an effect on me. I don't think I'm a sociopath, but I might be over in that direction a little bit because after a while, you feel like you should be emotionally appalled by some of these things. I'm appalled by the Ukraine. I'm absolutely appalled by that. But one of the jobs I did as a young reporter is I went out to the crash site of a jumbo jet in the Everglades, in which 100 and some people were killed. And I watched them pulling body parts out of the swamp and headless, armless people. And that was just the start of things. And from there, I went on to, murdered children. And I had to say that my wife did the same thing. My wife did things kind of routinely that scared me when she tells me about them. She covered a crack gang. She did a long series of stories about a crack gang, interviewing the actual members of the gang and stuff like that. And the leader of the gang, 2 weeks after the story came out, was assassinated in a phone booth and shot to death. And so we've both, and Michelle was once threatened by a serial killer in the courtroom. He said, "I'm going to get you, bitch." And Michelle was like, "Really?" So we've got those stories in my family, so to speak, and so we know those people kind of.
Well, you've never shied away from violence in the Lucas Davenport series, but as Lucas has kind of moved on, in his career trajectory, now he's a U.S. Marshal, which I think you have said to me, John, is maybe the most violent of the federal law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, I think it is. I don't know what else would be. That's just me saying it off the top of my head. But if you look up police-involved shootings from any one agency, it's not the FBI. It's going to be a federal agency. The DEA is pretty violent. ICE can be pretty violent. But I think the Marshal Service tracks down hardened criminals who have either escaped or haven't shown up for trial, or in some other ways have involved the Marshal Service. And a lot of those people are not going back to jail. They're headed straight, for the Rock up in the Rockies. They're going to a maximum security prison someplace, and they're not going to go. So they get in shootouts with the Marshal Service on a fairly regular basis, and the Marshals almost always win. Not always, but almost always. Well, and the FBI also has some hardcore people too. Two FBI agents, one male and one female, were killed in a raid in Miami just a few months ago, which is tragic.
Because Lucas is a U.S. Marshal, he's not just operating in Minnesota or Iowa, where some of the cases have taken place, but he's been down in the South, down in Florida. But you've written over 30 books about Lucas, and I felt like this book about Letty kind of gave you a recharge. Do you think that is, did you feel more energized in this writing?
Yeah, that's fair. That is, because I still like the Lucas books. I still really kind of think in Lucas's terms, and Letty is not exactly a little Lucas, because for one thing, she's a woman and she has a different attitude toward life and toward things, but they're a lot alike in many ways. And the thing is, she's killed those two people when she was a teenager, and it never bothered her. And her mother, Weather, Davenport's wife, actually had a little talk with her about the whole problem of being a sociopath or something. And she said that she really didn't think Letty was a sociopath, because she didn't think Lucas was a sociopath, because she knew Lucas got very emotionally involved in things sometimes. And she thought Letty would probably too, but there's that question of, why don't you react like normal people? Why aren't you shocked by yourself when you kill somebody from 2 feet away with a big, powerful handgun? And that's where people like Michelle and I sort of tend to react when you see a body. Michelle's softer hearted than I am about that kind of stuff, but I have seen enough bodies in my life that I'm no longer shocked by it. And if there's a television show that was on national television a long time ago, but is now streaming on one of the streaming services. I think it's on Netflix or HBO Max, one of those. called The Mentalist. And it's about this guy who figures things out kind of like Sherlock Holmes in his head. But the point is that they show these cops, every show starts with a murder. They show these cops going there. They're not, you know, the mentalist gets down on his hands and knees and smells them if he senses something about them. They're not bothered by bodies. They're not bothered by blood anymore because that's their job and that's what they do all the time. So I think you can be pretty up close and personal with guns and bullets and all that kind of stuff without being a sociopath.
Well, I worry a little bit about weather because over the years, John and I have discussed various ways to kill her off. He's been stopped in his tracks because I think it's his publisher said that it wouldn't be a really good idea to kill weather. But, there isn't room for another woman in Lucas's life in a romantic sense. So it's great to have Letty. We have Virgil too, because Virgil is now part of the Lucas Davenport series. Well, I mean, they've been affiliated all along. And Virgil's had quite a way with women over time, but now he's a dad. Don't I remember that Virgil and his partner have had, is it twins?
They had twins, yes. One of each, boy and a girl.
So Letty is kind of a nice balance over here for Lucas. And speaking of Lucas, when are we going to see Lucas again?
This fall. It's called Righteous Prey, and it's quite a complicated story. But it's about a group of people called the Five, who are all very rich winners in the Bitcoin race. And they were early investors in Bitcoin. They're not all billionaires, but they're very rich and they're very bored. And they decided it'd be a good idea. I don't know what kind of language I'm allowed to use, but I'm going to use it anyway. They're allowed to kill assholes. And they say that there are these people out there who are simply assholes. They're not criminals. They don't commit crimes, but they're just a waste of space. And they do things that are really bad, but legal. And it's time we start getting rid of them. It's just time, and so they start killing people. And after they kill one of them, they send out a press release, and the press releases are really kind of snotty, and they kill several people. I don't want to get too much into the story because you want to read the book, but I think it might kind of go back to what you were talking about when you said that. You're dealing with kind of the middle, the working class people in America who are kind of in bleak circumstances right now. The heavy industrial, good paying industrial jobs are going away and they're not coming back. And this story is about people that those people would seriously resent because they are just money grubbers who will do anything for a buck. And it goes from the bottom of society right to the top. It goes from one of the victims, for example, is a street person in San Francisco, but he is the ugliest kind of street person, the kind of street person who rapes people on the street, who stabs people, who just doesn't care about anything, up to a guy who's famous. And so they're just killing assholes, and that's what they're doing. And Davenport is desperate.
Plot summary, what's happening in the book. They're killing assholes. Well, let's go back to The Investigator because we have discussed John's. Not only is it an interesting plot, basically this is a heist novel with a lot of bodies because there is at the center of what's going on here, what Letty is sent out to or finds herself eventually involved in is kind of a giant heist in Texas, if I remember right. So where did you get this? I mean, it's a marvelous idea.
Well, I have got a real soft spot in my heart for Texas. And Santa Fe used to be part of Texas, actually 100 years ago. And it was part of the Texas territory, then got cut off. But I've got a soft spot in it. And down south, not far from Santa Fe, is the oil fields of West Texas and New Mexico, as a matter of fact, where both states get a lot of their income from. And I've always been sort of fascinated by it. You know, it's still one of those good paying roughneck kind of places where, you know, they're drilling oil wells and it's a bunch of tough guys. And so I just found that, I actually found that kind of as an environment before I actually had the story idea. I wanted to set something down there. I actually had another book called Golden Prey, in which some people were escaping across South Texas. They were trying to get across the border at one point at Presidio. And when I was researching that book, I went to Presidio and looked at it, and I thought, man, this would be a great site for a town, you know, for an invented town. And so that's what I did this time. I named it Pershing after General Pershing, who chased Pancho Villa all over northern Mexico for 3 years before not catching him, and went on to fame in World War I. But I like the environment, so I just put it in that environment. So,
well, I think it's a very interesting premise for a crime. So basically, what Letty is facing is a kind of coalition. I don't want to call them a militia because they're not really. They're, you know, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it, of people whose lives are just going nowhere, or as I said earlier, on a downward trajectory. Really a great sense of hopelessness and increasing resentment. And as I mentioned to John yesterday, the New York Times Magazine last Sunday ran a feature on the fact that we have too many billionaires. We have too many billionaires with too much of our resources all concentrated in a very few hands. It sort of reminds me of, you know, pre-French Revolution, where all the money was at Versailles in the hands of a few people and everybody else, you know, was increasingly pissed off. So, you know, what is it that these people are going to try to do about their situation is really the crux of the matter. And the woman that really is the main antagonist, I think, is a remarkable character. Is she wholly made up by you, John, or is there somebody you built her on?
There's not really anybody I built her on, other than the fact that I've known a lot of women like this just through my reporting times and that kind of stuff. Even one woman back in college, but they're smart, they're engaged, but they keep getting pushed down. You know, they keep trying to improve themselves and nothing works for them. Because in some ways, these people are naive, and because they still kind of believe in stuff, and they're being taken advantage of by people who don't believe in anything but money. And that's the way they feel. They feel that they should believe in stuff. I mean, basically, you know, they want to make $75,000 a year, have their kids go to the local, you know, play baseball, have their daughters play volleyball, and go to have decent public schools, maybe hold out the possibility that one of them is going to go to college, or at least a junior college or something like that. And so when they finally managed, after a lot of struggle, this woman first went in the Army because that's the only way she could get money to go to college. So she does 3 years in the Army. She comes out, she goes to college, and then she's told her degree is crap. And nobody ever told her that her degree was going to be crap because nobody in her family ever went to college. And she never had those things that upper middle class people have, where they're talking about college from the time they're in 10th grade. Or ninth grade, you know, they're pointing themselves at college. They know about college. They know other people have been to college. Their parents have been to college. All these people, and this woman had nothing. She was on her own. And when she got out of college, she'd had a couple jobs, which I characterized in the book as carrying batteries around an AutoZone store. And she gets out of college and she finds herself carrying batteries around an AutoZone store. I mean, she just got nowhere. And she just keeps feeling herself being pushed down.
And unfortunately, it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. Any of you who might have read Nickel and Dimed in America by Barbara Ehrenreich, I thought was a brilliant and really searing portrait of how when you get in that position, you can't ever get out of it. It's difficult for anybody who's not been in it to really understand it, but that cycle is discouraging. What this woman got was a degree, if I remember right, she got a degree in American history. Was that it? But the trouble is there's no vocation, there's no money attached to a degree in American history unless you want to be a teacher. And with her background, a life in academia seemed pretty remote. So, you know, she's filled with resentment and a wish to do better for not just herself. To be fair, she's not just looking after herself. Anyway, she's a really formidable foe. And so there we have Letty. So, John, we've talked about Letty killing people. We've talked about her terrible childhood. We've talked about the violence in this book and all. What's the title of your next Letty book?
Well, we don't have a title yet.
Yes, you do. Now, come on.
No, we've got a fake title. It's Letty Gets Laid. And I actually have a sex scene in the second chapter, which I think embarrassed my agent because she read an early version of it, and I think she was embarrassed by it. And not embarrassed by the writing, but embarrassed by the scene itself. And so I'm going to keep it. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know whether I'm going to tone it up or tone it down, but Letty. It just seemed to me, I mean, she's 25 years old and she's got a master's degree. And it seems to me like a woman like that, who's good looking, attractive, it is going to run into men who she finds attractive in one way or another. And so so I have a sex scene in the book, one. And I like it. And I think, I sort of don't buy into all the kind of the squeamishness about sex that we get a lot of it as a culture. It seems like, you know, you've got to get a telegram from somebody before you get into bed together saying it's okay. And so they're just attracted to each other and they wind up in bed, and that's a good thing.
Well, I think Letty Get Laid as a title that might actually expand John's audience. Yeah. He claims that he has more women readers than men, and he's a little worried that a book about Letty won't keep the guys coming. But I think if we call it Letty Get Laid, I don't think he's going to lose his male audience. So if you're listening to this, his publisher, pay attention here. I think it's a great title. And I'm going to think of it that way, and I'm going to talk about it that way, whatever it turns out to be. I really love it. But let me think, what else? Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. So I talked to you earlier about, or we talked earlier about your career as a reporter. So the question comes up, what brought you to write fiction? Why did you decide to write a novel?
Well, when we were talking last,
your answer was one word. Your answer is one word.
Money. I needed money because I had a wife and two kids who were all wanting to go to college at the same time, and I was not making enough as a reporter to support that. And that, by the way, is one of the kind of the sub-theme in that book, when the woman has to go into the Army for 3 years before she can afford to go to a state college, and not even the major state college. It's sort of out there in West Texas. It's not, you know, but when I went to college, and this is honest to God truth, I mean, you went to kind of an elite college, but I went to a land-grant university, and I paid $360 a semester in tuition. And when my wife and two kids wanted to go to land-grant universities, it was $12,000 a year to go to those places. And there was inflation between the time I went and between the time they went. There was 20-some years of inflation, but it wasn't $360 to $12,000. And I could afford to, I went to college for $12,000 a year. And I mean, for everything, for room, board, tuition, whole shooting match, not $1,200 a year.
I was going to say, I mean, this is a long time ago, but when I went to Stanford in 1958, the tuition was $2,000. And yep. Then, you know, associated costs. So when you're saying 12, I'm trying to work out how that works. So 1,200 makes a lot more sense.
Right. It was $1,200, and that was room, board, in the dormitory, and food. And I mean, you could survive and go to college if you had to do it. You could do it. But now college is almost out of reach for the kind of the top 25%. I mean, you know, for the 25% level. I mean, you know, you can be kind of in the upper part of the middle class and still get really hurt by just sending your kids to a land grant school.
You can, and I mean, digressing off here into higher education, and using your lady in this book as an example, I think it's too bad that we don't have more vocational training because, as you've already pointed out in the book, a degree in American history doesn't really turn into much of a salary. And, there's a real dearth of people who know how to do things, how to fix things, how to build things, how to repair things and all. And I'm not sure how we got so far away from that. If we got, so elitist that, we felt like everybody has to have some kind of, I mean, I graduated from Stanford with a degree in French and political science. And what good was that? So I kept on going to graduate school and, eventually it worked out. But, and I was discouraged from going to law school because, I wasn't Sandra Day O'Connor, but they said to me that a law degree for a woman in 1960, I was mostly going to be doing juvenile law or family law. I'd never see a courtroom or other things. And that didn't really interest me. So, times have really changed in terms of what women's expectations can be. But your woman is what? How old is she in this book? She's in her 50s, maybe?
Oh, she's in her 30s. She's in her middle 30s.
No, I don't mean Letty. I mean the other woman. Is she that young?
Yeah, she's in her 30s. She's not that much older than Letty. She's 10 years older than Letty.
Oh, okay. All right. I've sort of forgotten that. Right.
But she's got talents too, but the talents, she's got no place to take her talent. She organizes this, this attack that comes up, but she's sort of just out there.
Well, I really think this book is wonderful. I'm so glad to see Letty has returned to us from Naked Prey. I'm delighted to know that we're going to have a Virgil in the fall and possibly Letty get laid next year. No, wait, I said Lucas, but I also meant Virgil. Are you keeping Virgil now and Lucas together as kind of a loose partnership or something in the books going forward?
Yes, they were in Ocean Prey together, and then they're in this current book together, and so I've got them. They're in Righteous Prey, and so I've got them, and that's probably how I'm going to end my career with those two guys working together, because I don't want to lose them. But on the other hand, I sort of want to continue Letty for a while. I'm not going to try to get 30 books out of her, but I might try to go for 4 or 5. So
I think that would be wonderful. I live in terror that one day I'm going to pick up something from your publisher and the title is going to be Final Prey, and and then my heart will then crack. So I'm hoping that I won't see that for a long time. But John, it's good to bring to do something a little bit different. Bring new characters forward and see what happens. Yep. You absolutely love telling stories. I mean, I've known you for a really long time, and I think that telling stories is who you are. I can't imagine you not writing.
Well, the problem is there's an aspect of writing that is pretty much physical. I mean, it's got a physicality to it, and when I get finished writing at the end of the day now, if it's a productive session, I'm really tired. I mean, I'm getting, I'm an old guy, and working hard makes me tired, and at some point, at some point it's going to end, and I'd rather end it on an upward note rather than a downward note, So
and be rejected, right?
Well, you just had a good friend who died not long ago after a huge career of writing books, and I think you kind of saw him go away in his late 80s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that happens.
We're all different, Patrick, come and join us. Patrick will tell you that he expects me to outlive him, and he's 30 years my junior. So, who knows? None of us really know, but I can't imagine not working, and I can't imagine you not writing. But you could slow down to maybe 1 book a year, 1 book every 2 years. It doesn't have to be this pace. Patrick, what would you like to contribute to this conversation?
Well, there's a lot of guitar theory that John could learn, right?
You're back to guitars. I knew you were going to do that.
I didn't show it. I don't think I showed Pat this yesterday, but I have been carrying around. I don't think I've got it with me now. Maybe I do. I've got this little deck of cards. It's guitar theory. Written on
right.
cards that I can carry in my pocket. And so I look at them and I say, all right, what am I going to get for a scale in E flat?
Well, that's great.
And so on this little deck of cards, it's E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, and D. You know. And so what I did is I bought a deck of blank cards, which you could buy on Amazon, just blank playing cards, which are very sturdy. And I write my I write my guitar theory on that. So.
Circle of fifths and all that stuff.
Oh my God. Don't talk to me about circle of fifths. I could dream about that some nights. So.
Yeah, fun stuff. Let me see here. Are there any questions that have come in? Okay, yeah, Susan would like to know. These are kind of some standard questions, but what books are on your nightstand right now? I know you're an avid reader. And what writers, living or dead, would you like to meet?
Actually, right now I am reading, I think I mentioned this to you yesterday, Patrick. I've got the Every Man's Library of George Orwell essays, which is several hundred pages long of small type. And I've been working my way through that. And he was just he was an amazing writer, and he had amazing insights into things. And a lot of it is relevant to what we're going through now, especially his commentaries about fascism and the way it seemed to him that the fascists were taking over the political life in the world. And he refers to many different kinds of fascism. You know, there's soft stuff and hard stuff and all that, but it all kind of comes out in the wash the same way. And so it's a very interesting book, and I've been working my way through it now for a month or so. And I'm about halfway through, although I'm tending to skip around a little bit. So that's like the main thing that I'm reading right now. And although I bought a book at your shop 2 days ago about the war between the Patriots and the Loyalists during the Revolution. So if you look on your nonfiction shelf there, you'll find a gap where I took that book out.
Was that the Nathaniel Philbrick book, maybe?
I think maybe it was.
Yeah. So would Orwell qualify as somebody that you'd be interested in meeting?
Well, he's dead, so.
He is dead, but.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Sure, I would have loved to have spoken to him. There are lots of people that I would really love to talk to. I've got a book, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, but it's about truth in the Old Testament of the Bible. And he, as I understand it, is a fundamentalist Christian of a sort. It's kind of an unusual group of people that he works with, but he gives you proofs that some parts of the Old Testament are accurate in the simplest sense of actually being true, and other parts, he's willing to concede are more storytelling. But there was I don't want to get too deeply into this because I've been deep into it, but there was a controversy going on between people who think that the Bible was written so far after the events it depicts, 400 or 500 years afterwards, that nothing in it is accurate. And he said, that it appears to him, and I agree with him, that the Bible writers had sources that went back that far. Stella, King's List, that kind of thing. And so it's, hey, if you guys are sold out of my book, how come there are 3 of them behind Patrick's head?
Well, they belong to other people, but we stole them for stage.
I borrowed them from the people that bought them.
Oh, okay.
They just don't know that.
Shipped them yet. No, shipping lags behind selling, John. It is not a seamless process, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I remember Karen Armstrong, in some of her books, like The History of God, makes some of those same connections too. Very interesting.
Yeah, she's more interested though in literary finds, or literature finds, not literary finds, literature finds.
Yeah.
From the neglected gospels and things like that.
Of the Gnostics and all that. Yeah.
Yep. And there's been quite a bit of that kind of stuff popping out of the sands in Egypt. So.
The Thomas Gospel and all that stuff.
Actually, to really digress, John pointed out in our most recent conversation relating to his work with an archaeological dig in Israel, where John did the photography for years and which is about to be turned into book and all, that there's no actual evidence that Solomon ever existed. That David, there is some historical evidence that he was, had a kingdom and so forth, but Solomon, no. I was fascinated with that, John. I always thought, he was based on fact, just the way David was.
No, the thing is that what you're looking for is outside evidence. So there's a lot of detail in the Old Testament about Solomon, and there are a lot of stories and stuff like that. But what you want is like for example, in the case of David, there are two stela that are contemporaneous with him that refer to him, and not necessarily a good way. And so one of them refers to, for example, the house of David. So if there's a house of David that's being referred to, in the 9th century BC, then David probably existed. But Solomon, who was supposed to be a much bigger and more important, powerful figure than his father David was, it's not a single thing anywhere that refers to Solomon. And so there are a lot of kind of crazy theories out there about it. And one of them is that the Bible writers were actually speaking about a pharaoh, because it seems very much Solomon is very pharaoh-like, and so there may have been some confusion over the centuries when the Bible, between the time of the events and the Bible written, and they wound up making a pharaoh into Solomon. I will tell you one of the, just very quickly, very interesting thing about, there's this group of letters that were dug up in Egypt called the Armardo Letters. And to tell you what kind of situation you're talking about, it referred to a king who was writing to the pharaoh because he wanted help, because he was being threatened by another group of people. But he wanted the pharaoh to send him some soldiers to take care of this problem. And so the king did, and he suggested that 2 or 3 guys would take care of it. And so when you think about that kind of thing, 2 or 3 guys would take care of it. You realize that this kingdom is not a kingdom. It's more like what we would call a neighborhood, and that he's being threatened by a street gang. And you send a couple of tough guys down there to take care of the street gang, and the problem goes away. So when we talk about kings in the Bible, we might be talking about groups of 20 people who've got a mayor. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff that pops out of reading that kind of stuff.
Fascinating, indeed it is. Anything else, Patrick?
Let's see here. Someone named Edward here. He's just making some nice comments. He says, Freeman, Kruger, Sandford, what is it about Minnesota that turns out so many great writers?
The winter.
Is it the climate?
Yes, it's the winter.
Yeah.
You're freezing your ass off in the winter time. What are you going to do? It's like
inside.
They're only outside so much. No, but there are a lot of good writers coming out of Minnesota. My friend Larry Blatt has now published probably 8 books about architecture, and more books about with Sherlock's Holmes pastiche, in which Sherlock comes to Minnesota, where he cooperates with a barkeep, and they solve mysteries in Minnesota. And so, and they're good books. They really are. They make me laugh. His hero's named Rafferty. But at any rate, there are just a lot of good writers in Minnesota. I read someplace, by the way, that there are one time in Minnesota, and I don't know, dug this up. There are 10,000 novels underway in Minnesota.
Wow.
At any one time.
That is an impressive number. Of course, how many of them actually emerge as, published is another story, but
and how would they get that statistic? That's interesting.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand, how you get that.
Yeah.
I will tell you, though, that there was a woman who was a reporter for the Star Tribune in Minneapolis, who wrote a book called Bring Warm Clothes. And essentially was a history of Scandinavian immigration into Minnesota in the 19th century. And she sold a couple 100,000 copies of that book in Minnesota. I mean, nobody else would buy it outside there. And not only that, the book sells for like $50 a copy. And so, we're talking about $10 million I mean, sold in Minnesota. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on up there. And the University of Minnesota Press and the Historical Society Press are both very active, and they're interesting places.
And you got Bob Dylan.
Yeah, then you got Bob Dylan, who's got a Nobel Prize in Literature. So,
yeah.
Sorry.
Last question is, what did John do to his thumb?
What did I do to this thumb?
Yeah.
I got bit by a dog. Not bit by a dog. I stuck my finger in a dog's mouth. And so, what can I tell you? And I've got 2 big dogs, and we wrestle and we fight for balls. And so I got it just a nick, and it hurts. And I didn't mention this last night, but in 2020, after the start of the COVID virus, I sold my cabin in Wisconsin, and I went up there to pick up my canoe, which was on the top of a truck, of a pickup truck that I was driving. My wife's pickup truck, actually. I fell off the truck, is what I'm trying to say, on the side of I-35 in deepest Iowa. I broke my arm. I was 30 miles from the nearest emergency room. And I drove down to the second exit I came to had a little convenience store off to the side. And I pulled in there and I said, could you tell me where there's a hospital? And the clerk was behind the counter, and she said, no. I said, okay. She didn't know where there was a hospital. And so I wound up calling my sister, who was a nurse. And I said, what should I do? And because my arm was starting to hurt. And I broke it just below the shoulder. And so she went to the internet and she said, well, drive to this place. So I drove 30 miles to the nearest emergency room, and they took a picture of my shoulder and said, yep, you broke it. And then I had a boat, which I'm in the process of selling, down in Fort Lauderdale. I was jumping off the boat onto a pier, and my shorts got caught on a cleat on the boat and hung me up. And I went face down like this and landed on the pier on my shoulder and broke my ribs in my upper part of my body up here. And just about the time they healed up, I went on another trip in that boat down the Florida Keys, and I fell down the ladder from the fly bridge to the bottom, and I broke 4 ribs in this side of my body. So I've had all these breaks in 2 years. The weird part of that particular trip was that we couldn't get out, and we couldn't take the boat down to the emergency room because it was too far and it had gotten really rough, and we were anchored in a bay. So we went over to an RV park, which we could see on this island, and had arranged for a cab to pick me up to take me to the emergency room. And the guy who drove the cab that showed up was a Haitian guy who had just gotten there, spoke Creole but no English. And so we headed down south on the highway. It's a narrow 2-lane highway down the Florida Keys. The guy drove the entire 30 miles using his left knee to steer with while he texted the entire 30 miles. And we got all these RVs and semis and stuff coming north, and we're going by south in the back praying. It's like, God, I thought I was going to die. But
I'm really glad you didn't. But I have to offer the thought that maybe your exhaustion while writing is actually medical rather than age. If you keep bashing up your body, it's hard to be creative. With
I've always bashed up my body. This is the 3rd time I've had broken ribs. I studied karate for a long time. I got a black belt in karate at one point, and I got my ribs stove in during a karate class. And another time I tried to kick a guy, and I fell down and put my hand down and broke my wrist. And so, in my entire life has been involved broken bones. And so I just try to use them in the work, what can you do?
Christ, he's not writing medical thrillers like Robin Cook or something. That's what we're getting. Well, it really has been a terrific treat I keep wanting to hold up this book, but that actually is the wrong book. Patrick has the book. It's really fun to spend time with Lady Davenport. Lucas is in the book. It's a really fascinating story, but it's also one that will really make you think about why our country is so divided. I mean, it's not an issue book. It's a heist novel, and it's fun. But I think it really gets to grips with situations that many of us may not be as familiar with as we could be. So I do thank you for that, John. It really is a terrific book to read.
I think that in terms of just enjoying myself, I enjoyed this book as much as I have any book for the last 15 years, I think. And then I actually enjoyed the new book that's coming out this fall, the new Lucas book, because parts of it made me laugh, because the idea of killing assholes just really appeals to me. You got to get rid of them somehow. And,
well,
so,
that's a great title too, by the way.
What?
Oh. Killing assholes.
Killing assholes.
Well, it's
called, right along with Letty Gets Laid, It's
yeah.
Right. So it'll be called Righteous Prey, but we can call it Killing Assholes.
Killing assholes.
I mean, right. So I'm thinking of a new deal where we're going to create our own dust jackets for John's books, and we're going to wrap them. That happened years ago with GM Ford wrote a book called Who the Hell is Wanda Fuca? And the bookstore, mystery bookstore in Seattle, which is no longer there, actually did that. They created a brown paper wrapper and a suitable image and so forth. It was terrific. So maybe that'll be our deal, kiddo. We'll do the Letty Get Laid jacket and the Killing Assholes jacket, and those.
I wonder how much that would cost.
That's a great idea.
Well, I mean, say you just did a brown paper wrapper that there's like the kind of paper you use in grocery bags, and then just had it printed up. Letty Gets Laid, wrap, sign it, make it a thing, and send them off. It's like
we can figure it out. Don't worry. We're actually good at this kind of thing. We do a lot of extra stuff, for books, and it's a lot of fun. Some publishers actually
maybe sell them for a $10 premium or something.
Well, yeah, why not? Anyway, thank you all for joining us this evening. For those of you who were frustrated trying to watch the live event, I hope that we've given you some of the flavor of what you missed. And I really appreciate John spending even more time with us as a consequence. He's very good natured about it. And we'll be shipping off books to him tomorrow. So good evening, everybody. And you can watch, as I said, the first 10 minutes from last night on is it already there, Patrick? Did you post it?
No. I need to talk to Rob about that. There was a little problem.
Okay. So tomorrow you can watch the first 10 minutes of last night before it all went south. Anyway, and we'll see John in the fall, which I will be very, very happy to do. I don't know what month it is. I haven't looked it up. Do you know? Is it October?
It's October.
Okay. So we'll get to see John in October and we can talk further. Anyway, good night, everybody.
Yep. Good night.
Night.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.